All right, well, we made it, people. We're at week 9 of this series. I know it's been a long one. It's been a big book, so for some of us, that was a lot of reading. But we've made it to the end of this series, and I hope, again, as I say every single week, I hope you found it insightful. I hope you found it challenging. I hope you found some tools that will help you to be a better parent or grandparent or teacher or coach or leader or whatever else it may be as we look at this younger generation, Generation Z. And as we kind of wrap up this series, as we kind of look ahead, I want to just give you some food for thought, maybe a little challenge here. One of the things that was brought up, maybe it was last week's reading, was this idea of learned helplessness. And I kind of feel like for a lot of us, when it comes to this younger generation, and we're very tempted perhaps to kind of just go to learned helplessness, where we're just like, man, I don't know, the problem's just so big. It's just so many different issues to deal with. Like, what are we going to do? There's so many kids that whatever. And it can just become this thing where we just throw our hands in the air and say, I just surrender, I give up. And I want to challenge you not to do that. I want to challenge you to not just kind of give up and say it's too overwhelming, it's too intimidating, I don't know what to do. Here's what I want to challenge us to do as we wrap up this series, as we hopefully again carry some steps that we can take in order to improve our relationship with the younger generation. And that's something that I've always, being a youth pastor for so many years, I would kind of have this idea, and I would try to get this out to the volunteer leaders and the staff and the parents, saying, here's what we're trying to do. And so I think it would also help us as we look at Generation Z. And that is this, it's kind of, if you're a parent or maybe you have you're a young parent, or maybe you're a grandparent, it's like, I would think the goal would be to say, hey, how do I envision what I want my kid to be, my student to be, the students that I work with to be, the students that I coach with to be? It's like, what's the picture? What's the vision for what I'm trying to accomplish in them? And then what I would always do is kind of say, here's what, like when it comes to students in youth program, I would say, here's what a discipled student look like. Here's what I want a student to look like. If they've been under my leadership in my program for 7 years, here's what I want. Here's like the ideal. Here's what I would want them to look like. Is it up to me? Not always, but what can I do to move them in that direction? So I would say, here's the end goal, and I want to start here. So if I got a 6th grader, here's what I want them to look like when they graduate. And I would kind of have to work back and say, okay, if I want them to be engaged in worship, if I want them to be comfortable in prayer, if I want them to know God's word, if I want them to be excited about missions and God's plans for their lives, okay, that's the end goal, but that's going to be maybe not where they're at when they're in 6th grade. So how do I help them make steps to become that? And so you got to kind of start with the end goal, the end vision in mind, and then go, okay, well, how do I get to that point? And so when you kind of think about a lot of stuff that we've been talking about over the last 9 weeks, and again, it can be overwhelming, it can be intimidating. I think a practical step is to say, okay, well, what do I want my kid to look like when they graduate? What do we want the kids in our youth program to look like when they graduate? And then back it up and then say, how do I ramp them up to become that? How do I get them to there? And so if we're saying, hey, my kid's a spoiled brat, whatever example you may want to say, it's like, okay, and I want them to be different. I want them to look like this, instead of just giving up and saying, I don't know what to do. It's like, say, that's the goal. What can I be doing now to baby step them in that direction, to move them in that direction? Again, it's not always up to us. It's not always up to you, but what can you be doing to make that possible? And so I really want this to be practical, and I don't want it just to be like we just talked about this for 9 weeks and then it just went away and we didn't do anything about it. And so I really challenge you, if you have a kid, if you have a student, if you have a grandkid, or if you have kids that you work with, it's like write out, what do I want them to look like in 5 years? What do I want them to look like in 7 years? What do I want them to look like when they graduate? And then figure out practically how to move them in that direction in each area. Because if it's too broad, it'll be too difficult, but get specific. So like I mentioned, when it came to youth, it would be like, what does it look like? I want a kid to look like when it comes to worship, when it comes to prayer, when it comes to giving, when it comes to serving, what I want it to look like, and how do I give them opportunities to grow in that over time. Being patient with them because it takes time to grow and it takes time to mature, and I can't expect them to go from 0 to 100 overnight. I have to be willing to play the long game and to have a longer term strategy to get there. And so as we kind of wrap up this series, I just want to put that out to you, that if you're feeling overwhelmed and intimidated and kind of learned helplessness with this whole thing, start with the target and work your way back and figure out some practical little things that you can do to get to that goal. And I think that will help us take a big subject and hopefully make it more practical. So just kind of parting words for advice. I'm hoping that you guys will be able to discuss some of these ideas maybe, or maybe you won't have time to think about it really in depth before your discussion right now. But hopefully the discussions are stirring some of that stuff with you, and you will leave this whole series with some practical steps that you're going to take. So I hope it's been a good journey. I hope you guys have really bonded together as a group over the semester as you've talked about this issue, and I hope that you will take it and do something with it. So have a great discussion, and we won't see you at Grove for a while, but we'll see you on Sunday morning.